In less than a week, this fine gentleman makes its way to Pokemon Unite. That's right, Darkrai will be here very soon, and here's everything you need to know before it hits Eos Island. Jake, your resident content cowboy here. Yeehaw, let's do this. In this video, I'll talk about moves, combos, held items, boost emblems, just a little bit of everything. Jake, your resident content cowboy here. Yeehaw, let's do this thing. I want to start by talking about Darkrai's kind of big thought process here, which is it puts enemies to sleep and does huge amount of burst damage. This is its passive right here. You deal damage over time to nearby sleeping opposing Pokemon. It looks to be based on their max HP, and this damage by this ability will not wake them up. Opposing Pokemon affected by this take increased damage from the next attack, and you'll see that here in this video as I show kind of how these moves combo. If you take a look at how the game classifies this Pokemon, its offense is 4.5 stars, which I'd say is about right. Its mobility is not super high for a speedster. It does feel a little slow. In fact, at times it feels like kind of a bursty ranged attacker, which is pretty interesting, and I'll show you what that means. And up here it says it's attack based. That's incorrect. That's just something in the public test server. It is a special attack Pokemon, and it says it's expert difficulty. I would happen to agree. This will be a tough one for many players. All right, let's get into its moves. Hypnosis is the first move you're going to take here. You deal damage to your opponents when you hit them with it, and it also puts them to sleep pretty fast here. You can see that ticking damage on the enemy right there. That is your passive dealing damage to them just being around them, okay? So again, it does not wake them up dealing that passive damage. It's also going to give you a boosted, having an enemy that you put to sleep. You can see your boosted counter ticks up. Your basic attacks deal attack damage, right? Because they're not boosted. Like most all Pokemon, even, you know, special attackers. Some do basic attacks that are special attack, but almost all of them do regular attack based damage. Your boosteds, however, do special attack damage in a huge burst. So when you put an enemy to sleep, you get a boosted. That boosted has massive range that does huge damage. You just see that damage fly in from the void, right? You can see it again close up. It looks like this. The damage flying in and hitting them right there. You can see the tick damage on this substitute tall. Again, it looks like it's based on max HP because it's so huge. But your boosteds have a massive range. I'm hitting them from all the way out here, which sets up a lot of interesting plays for Darkrai. You could literally hit someone, put them to sleep, and deal damage from all the way over there. Basically, the entire length of the screen you can hit with your boosted attacks. It's pretty crazy. But back to your moves. Your second move is Calm Mind. Really basic, gives you some stats, some special attacks, special defense, as well as some extra move speed. Now let's talk about your next moves. The basics of this kit early on is just going to be put them to sleep, deal some damage, and see if you can pick up a KO, right? That's what you're looking for there. Funny enough, they made it Cinderace as its little icon. That's the basics. And one tough thing about this Pokemon is it doesn't get its first move until level 6, making its early gank really bad, which means you might be playing this in lane. It doesn't do that well as a jungler, given that it has no upgraded move until level 6. It kind of reminds me of Zeraora, right, in that sense. But it still can be pretty strong. Your first move options, Dark Void or Shadow Claw. Let's get into it. So, Dark Void, it attacks in a cone area in front of you. It deals damage to your opponents and it marks them right here, right? If you hit them after being marked, they fall asleep and then it gives you that boosted. Your boosted sits on you for 5 seconds. So you're able to kind of hit them with Dark Void, hit them, they fall asleep for a second. You can be very far away and then still hit them with that big time boosted. You can kind of play this at extreme range in a weird way from your opponents, kind of weaving in and out of combat, especially with the use of your second move. The other interesting thing about Dark Void is it fans out in a really nice way, and you can hit multiple enemies with it pretty easily. Your attacks also kind of hit in an area, so you can hit Dark Void on all of these, put most all of them asleep, boosted all of them. Huge damage. You could, of course, do this to the enemy team as well. Massive damage where you're hitting tons of enemies with boosted attacks that you don't even need to be next to them for. The upgrade to this move at level 11 applies a slowing effect when you hit them, but as you can see, you hit them, they fall asleep for a moment, and then you get that big time boosted on your opponents. A pretty basic move, and I would say on the public test server, given that there's ping, and given that the other moves are a little... well, they're really interesting, but they can be really wonky. I feel like Dark Void was the stronger choice for sure on the test server. At level 7, you get your second move option. We're going to start with Nasty Plot. The reason for this being, I feel like Nasty Plot and Dark Void are going to be played together more often. However, you can mix these movesets around a bit, right? So Nasty Plot is a dash, and it gives you a Nasty Plot counter. You can see that above my head right there. You are able to stack up to 2 of these. Stacking these just does extra damage on your next attack. Very simple. You can see the energy from the Void flying out and dealing damage to the Bunnelby right here. Pretty basic, of course. If you only have 1, it deals 1 extra hit of damage right there. Super, super simple move. It's nice to have a little extra dash. It's on a pretty low cooldown, and when you pair it with the rest of your moves, you're doing pretty good damage right here, right? You're doing this extra damage, you're putting them to sleep, Nasty Plot comes back, Dark Void comes back, and you continue to combo this. This is the more basic moveset, and I don't really think there's anything wrong with a basic moveset, especially if it works pretty dang well and you're able to do a lot of damage to your opponents with it, right? The nice thing about both of these moves is they're on a really low cooldown. They're pretty easy to use, I would say. The upgrade to Nasty Plot really sets up some massive moments because Nasty Plot will now reset when you put an opponent to sleep. So basically, you dash in, attack, put them to sleep, you immediately get your dash again, and you're just going to keep fighting. You'll combo this with your Unite move as well, which I'll show you in a moment. It's just really set up to be able to do insane damage in a huge burst. Your other option for your first move upgrade at level 6 is Shadow Claw. Shadow Claw is going to do damage, having these claws kind of ripping out from the ground, moving in front of you, and then it marks your opponents. It also gives you a second hit of damage. The second hit does not mark your opponents. The first one does. So it's similar to Dark Void in that you're going to do damage. After it hits them, you then hit the enemies multiple times, and then they fall asleep. Kind of very similar, right? We've got a pretty similar setup. Dark Void has this bigger cone that's a little easier to hit with. Shadow Claw gives you 2 options to hit your opponents, which is nice. So you're just gonna have to decide which one of those you like more. I think Dark Void is a little easier to use. Shadow Claw is a little narrower. It combos with the next move in some really interesting but confusing ways, and this move combo was one of the more controversial things about this Pokemon's kit in the test server. Let's talk about it. All right, Dark Pulse. Before we get back to Shadow Claw, Dark Pulse has you dive in for a dash, and then you kind of play this interesting game of whack-a-mole with your opponents, where you can pop out, deal damage, hide here for a very long time, and then burst out in another area. It's such an interesting move, and it's also very hit and miss. Quite literally, you'll hit and miss with it. And then also there are times where you just feel like, man, I'm in this Dark Pulse forever. It's a little hard to get out of there. You have to hit it like multiple times. There are some rumors that they maybe have changed this by the time it's coming to the game, but there's nothing in the test server that leads us to believe it actually is changed. There's just a tweet from Pokemon that lets us think that maybe we can leave Dark Pulse early, which would actually make this move probably a lot better. It's just really weird, really clunky, very hard to play on ping, and combos in an odd way with Shadow Claw that feels, I guess, maybe counterintuitive, or it's one of those moments. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Dragapult's Dragon Breath, where you actually don't really want to use it with Dragon Dance, even though it seems like you should. So let's talk about it here. You can use Dark Pulse, and you can use Shadow Claw inside Dark Pulse, which is pretty interesting, right? So when you use Shadow Claw, you can hit, you can go into Dark Pulse, and you can use Shadow Claw inside the Dark Pulse to deal some extra damage, which is pretty cool. You can then pop out and do some damage to your opponents, and in fact, if you hit them multiple times inside the Dark Pulse, they will fall asleep. You can do some cool damage to them. The confusing thing is, it feels like the game is encouraging you to use Dark Pulse and then Shadow Claw, right? To hit multiple times. But if you do this, as you can see, you didn't apply the mark with Shadow Claw to actually put this Pokemon to sleep, which is where almost all of the damage you're using Darkrai for comes from, when you can get those Pokemon to sleep and hit them with a boosted. So you actually need to hit them first with Shadow Claw, then into Dark Pulse, using Dark Pulse to kind of trigger the sleep right there. Then you pop out and hit them with Shadow Claw's second attack and use your boosted. It's a lot of damage. It's a big burst. It's a little confusing, and it feels like the game is actively telling you not to play it that way, but it is a much stronger combo. I still think in this form in the PTS, it's very wonky and not as good. you will have better results with the other moveset, but again, I don't know how it's going to release in the game. So I want to show you this moveset because it is extremely cool. It's just very weird. So back to talking a little bit about Shadow Claw. One of the interesting things with this is you would think you would want to hit with it and then immediately hit with your second instance of it, but you actually don't. If you can, you would like to put your opponents to sleep, have them affected by your passive, then hit them again because you deal extra damage. So you Shadow Claw, you hit your opponents a couple times, then when you hit with that boosted there, or excuse me, not your boosted, when you hit with Shadow Claw's second attack, you actually do more damage if they are affected by bad dreams. So that's why it combos this way with Dark Pulse. Again, the combo is weird. It's Shadow Claw into Dark Pulse, using the hits of Dark Pulse to put them to sleep. Then when you pop out, you hit them with Shadow Claw. When done well, this is going to do an insane amount of burst damage. When done poorly, well, you're going to see some allies do this poorly. And let's just all be patient because it's going to take a little while to learn this thing. As you can see right there, a cool moment. I was actually able to avoid the Unite move from Venusaur, but it's a little tricky to even hit with this. The timing of it's very bizarre. I feel like if the timing was with Dark Pulse was a little easier, this would be better. But you move in, you hit. If you chase them in, you can follow them. Unfortunately, once again, there was just like a weird timing issue. I wasn't able to hit exactly how I wanted to with Dark Pulse right there. Let's try it one more time. Venusaur's gonna KO me. We miss with Shadow Claw. Yeah, it's gonna take some getting used to. Shadow Claw, Dark Pulse. You hit with Dark Pulse. You can chase them around with Dark Pulse again, depending on where they land. They fall asleep, and then you hit them with Shadow Claw again. Big, big combo. As you can see, Venusaur almost taken out in one by that huge hit. Again, a little tricky. Very high skill, as we talked about earlier. This is a high skill Pokemon. But when used correctly, it's going to rip through enemies. And Dark Pulse, you know, it's very similar to the move that it's copied there for Phantom Force from Ceruledge. Just being able to completely negate everything going on in combat for a little while and then deciding where you're going to hop out is pretty huge, right? You could make some massive outplays because of a moveset like this. The plus version of Shadow Claw, by the way, increases the damage dealt, which is very nice. The plus version of Dark Pulse is going to give you a shield when this move hits, which is awesome. You're going to pop out of this with a little extra bulk, right? All right, now let's start talking about the Unite move and how this works with all your moves, because the Unite move is really good. All right, so Darkrai's Unite move. It is a sure hit Unite move with kind of a low range, but you can actually see, you can target someone quite a bit outside of this little circle right here. When you target your opponent, you bring them into sort of the nightmare realm with you. You're going to do damage over time to them. You're going to immediately put them to sleep, which gives you a boosted, and you're going to reset all of your move cooldowns. This is a very, very powerful move. For many Pokemon, this will be certain doom. There's just not much they're going to be able to do about it. So imagine you have a couple of like nasty plots built up as well, and you move in to fight your opponent, right? Again, when using this, all of your move cooldowns will reset. So you could literally nasty plot into Dark Void, knock them out, put them to sleep, into your combo, again Dark Void, hit them again, boost it again, Dark Void again, nasty plot again. Like, you could just do all of this and do insane burst damage right away. You pair that with the fact that you could have something like an X attack, like it will be very difficult for certain opponents to do anything about this. So if used correctly, this could just be a chain like combo. They are done right away, right? It's just really hard for them to do too much here. And because of that, you're going to be able to get huge KOs. Also, when you're inside this realm, you can see the boundary of it right here. You can't go out of it. You're going to appear right where you went in on it as Darkrai, and oftentimes your opponents will not come out of this. They are going to be in this nightmare realm with you. They can fight you in those moments, so if you have low HP, if they have good sustain, if they have some good combos, they can do something to you, but a lot of the time you're going to be able to pick up your KO in this moment. You just do so much damage. Let's take a look at it right here into this Venusaur. Let me turn my move cooldowns on so you guys can see my moves here. But if you were to dash in, hit them, deal some damage here right into the, you know, nightmare realm, boom, more damage, more burst damage. It's just really hard for your opponents to do too much. Once the KO is done, you reappear, one enemy on the enemy team gone, and now it's time for you to continue KOing enemies and just like chain through the rest of the game. This Unite move is so powerful that even if parts of Darkrai's kit might feel a little clunky, maybe a little underwhelming at times, depending on how it releases in the game, this is still insanely strong, and high skill players are going to have a field day with this Unite move. Now, one thing to point out is, yes, it's going to reset your move cooldowns, but when you hit with your Unite move, they are asleep for a moment and you get that first boosted. So you're going to want to use your first boosted before you use your move that puts them to sleep again right away. It's just a small moment, but it could be the difference between doing enough damage to get the KO and not. In most situations, you're just going to sneak up on your opponents and you're going to put them into like the nightmare realm, and it's time for them to go to sleep for a while at least. It's also a Unite move that charges pretty fast, especially if you're just able to KO, you know, a group of birds or whatever. Next time you see your opponents, you got it back, you're ready to go, and you're ready to pick off one of them again. Having one enemy out of a fight right away is massive, and also you're pulling them out of the fight. So let's say you lock down their Gardevoir. Well, it's not only that you're fighting Gardevoir, it's that Gardevoir can't use its Unite move on your entire team, right? So this Pokemon is completely set up to fight your opponents in crazy ways, not really fighting a lot of the objectives in the game, which I'll talk about here in a sec, right? So the interesting thing about this Pokemon is it's good against enemies, not good in other situations. So you can do some decent damage, but against the Regis, against Rayquaza, they do not go to sleep. So you do not get the extra procs of damage from any of your moves because of that. You could still hit them multiple times with Shadow Claw, Dark Void. Nasty Plot will still give you that extra counter to deal damage here. But as you can see, you're not very good at ripping objectives, which is really not your job. You are a stealthy assassin that is looking to go in, do massive burst damage all at once, and KO your opponents. As you can see, Registeel here is even giving me a run for my money. One thing you may want to do with Darkrai is stack. You know, Darkrai's stats, at least from the public test server, are pretty similar to what Gengar's are, and Gengar is one of those Pokemon that has good special attack, but it's not like a Gardevoir level of special attack, because you're all about doing burst damage, and just a little bit extra can change the entire game. I think it's very possible you're going to want to stack on this Pokemon. Now that we're here, let's talk a little bit about it. Let's talk about Darkrai's items. All right, so let's talk about some of Darkrai's item options here. I think Slick Spoon's kind of a no-brainer for lots of special attack Pokemon, but ignoring part of their special defense is massive. Choice Specs could be huge. When you go in and it's time to fight, that extra pop of damage that Choice Specs gives you could be the KO. Of course, it also gives you special attack. Special attack specs, I think, will be huge for this Pokemon. This really does feel like just all or nothing, burst them down, that's your only job. It could be very good. But there are some other options that I think could be pretty fun too. Depending on how it scales, Wise Glasses may be the call. We'll kind of learn from the math chords soon enough if that feels like a better option than some of these other ones. With its special attack not being Gardevoir levels high, like 1,000, I think it's closer to like mid 7s or high 7s at level 15. Wise Glasses may not be the choice. It might be Choice Specs. Shell Bell. Recently got a nice little buff to give you some more healing. It also gives you some cooldown, which is not bad, and some extra special attack. Depending on how much you're brawling with Darkrai, the healing could be a little something. It does heal off of its attacks that come from the void, those boosteds, which is awesome. And the Shell Bell might help a little bit. It also might not be as valuable as something like Choice Specs, but maybe if you don't want to stack, it's a way to go. Energy Amplifier's always an option. With a Pokemon that is looking to burst down and end things with a Unite move, this could just put you in a position to make that even easier and charge it a lot faster. I don't think you're going to need something like Buddy Barrier, because when you head into that void, I haven't found many moments, I should say, where your opponents do too well against you. There, of course, is a reality where Curse might be nice if someone does have a lot of healing, but I think the amount of burst you're trying to do is actually going to make it so Curse doesn't seem super relevant. then again, it could be. I mean, you're going to be able to do a lot of damage with some interesting damage over time with this Pokemon. You also have the option of Eos Cookie. If this Pokemon gets into the game and is just a little too squishy and can't survive long enough in fights, double stacking wouldn't be a terrible idea. There are a few Pokemon that actually do pretty well with that. You may also just want to run something like a Focus Band instead of having to stack. For boost emblems, I just pulled up something basic here from the math cord that I think will work pretty well from it. You've got 6 green, 7 black. More damage, right? More cooldown. At the same time, this has 2 white and a little extra special attack. Depending on how it scales, maybe you could go super cheesy and just throw a ton of special attack damage on here, but usually you don't need that extra little oomph, and a set like this is pretty dang good. Of course, there are always things we don't know. Did they change some of Darkrai's moves before release? What is its power level going to be like? I can tell you one thing for sure. This Pokemon is going to do really well in the hands of great players. And boy, some of these moves in the hands of bad players are going to be chaos. You're going to feel like there's a Darkrai on the enemy team with some of the stuff that could happen on your side. I hope this video helped you. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. Of course, once this Pokemon drops, it'll be spooky season around here, and we're gonna have a ton of videos about it. Love you guys. I'll see y'all next time. We did it. Oh, before I go, I should mention, it is confirmed that Darkrai will be available through a DICE event. So, similar to Pokemon like Zacian, Mewtwo, and stuff like that, you will unlock this Pokemon through playing if you do not want to pay for it. Okay, that's it. Goodbye.